learn about chemical reactions and equations. We will learn something more about equations. Chemical equation. What is an equation? Equation is defined as a state of being equal and is often shown as a math expression with equal values on either side. Then what must be a chemical equation? In science or in chemistry, we say that chemical reactions need to be represented in a form of an equation. Taking the simple example of carbon, when it burns in air, it forms carbon dioxide. But this cannot be written for complex reactions. Also, there is a need for a simple representation and balancing of the equation so the unknown quantities can be calculated. In the above case, we need to write the symbols and the chemical formula of the compounds, the elements. The above reaction can be written as C plus O2 forming CO2. Before we balance any chemical equation, we first have to write the skeletal equation. What is a skeletal equation? Well, a skeletal equation are those equations that shows that a reactant and product so formed without balancing it. Example, magnesium combining with oxygen forming magnesium oxide. When we are going to write the skeletal equation, we simply write it as Mg plus O2 forming MgO. Here you can see that number of magnesium and oxygen are not the same on both the reactant and product side. Then why do we need to balance a chemical equation? Well, if you remember in your earlier class, you had read that mass can neither be created nor be destroyed in a chemical reaction. That is, the total mass of the elements present on the product side of a chemical reaction has to be equal to the total mass of the elements present in the reactant side. Now let us balance it in case of magnesium oxide. Here we will first write down magnesium and oxygen number on the left hand side and on the right hand side. So number of oxygen is going to be more in case of the reactant side. To balance this, we will place a 2 in front of magnesium oxide. After doing so, we will now see that the number of magnesium and oxygen on the product side is 2 and that on the reactant side is 2 of oxygen. We also need to balance magnesium and that can be done by placing 2 in front of Mg. So the whole reaction is balanced. Taking another example where zinc is being added to sulfuric acid. What happens in this reaction? A gas is evolved which is hydrogen. Zinc plus sulfuric acid forming zinc sulfate and hydrogen gas. This equation is a word equation. Now we will write down the skeletal equation. Zn plus H2SO4 forming ZnSO4 plus H2. We will write down the number of reactants and products on both the sides. We have seen that all of them are the same on both the sides, hence the equation is balanced. Now let us take another example in which steam is going to be passed over red hot iron. We will see that it reacts and it forms Fe plus H2O, Fe3O4 plus H2. Now the equation is not balanced. We have to balance it. In this above reaction is not balanced, and when we have to obey the law of conservation of mass, we will balance it by the number of atoms on both the sides. The compound may be on the reactant or the product side. What we will do first is draw boxes on the elements or compounds so that we do not make any change in the formula. Now we will start by balancing the compounds that contains the maximum number of atoms. Here we have selected oxygen because it is 4 and it is on the product side. Now for this we need to balance it by placing a 4 in front of H2O. By placing 4, as you can see in the equation, number of hydrogen becomes 4 into 2, that is 8. Number of oxygen becomes 4 into 1, that is 4. Iron remains the same. On the product side, we will see now the number of hydrogen is 2, oxygen is 4. So we have to balance iron and hydrogen. For that, we will have to place a 4 in front of hydrogen, and now you can have 2 into 4, that is going to be 8. For balancing iron, we just need to place a 3 in front of Fe. And as we do this, we will find Fe will become equal on both the sides. Fe will be 3 on the reactant as well as product side. Hydrogen will be 8 on both the sides, and oxygen will also be 4. So the reaction is balanced. Now we can rewrite the equation as 3Fe plus 4H2O forming Fe3O4 and 4H2O. Let us do some questions which is given on page 6. Why should a magnesium ribbon be cleaned before burning it in air? Well, you know that magnesium is a very reactive metal and it reacts with the air forming magnesium oxide. This stops the further reaction of the magnesium ribbon. It will not burn, hence we have to clean it before burning it in air. Now the second question, where we have to balance a few equations. Here we can first write the skeletal equation, H2 plus Cl2 forming HCl. We can see that number of hydrogen and chlorine are not balanced on both the sides. For this, we just need to place a 2 in front of HCl, and the number of hydrogen and chlorine becomes balanced. Very easy. Now let us take a little complex reaction. Barium chloride plus aluminium sulfate forming barium sulfate and aluminium chloride. So we'll just write this, we'll make this table, and we will write down the number of atoms. We can see that I have taken sulfate as a single unit because sulfate, as you know, is a polyatomic ion and it is formed on both the sides. So I have taken sulfate as a unit. We can see that the number of sulfate ions on the reactant side is more. So we can balance this by placing a 3 in front of barium sulfate. So I have done that. Now we can see that the number of barium atoms on the product side is 3. Cl remains as 3, aluminium remains as 2, sulfate becomes 3. So now the number of only sulfate ions is balanced. The next step would be to balance the number of barium. That can be done by placing a 3 in front of barium chloride. That I have done. By doing so, I have made number of barium atoms on the reactant side to be 3. It is also 3 on the product side. But now the number of chlorine atoms will change from 2 into 3, which will be 6. On the reactant side, I will also have to balance the number of chlorine atoms by placing a 2 in front of aluminium chloride. So that will become 6. Number of aluminium atoms on the reactant side is 2. Number on the product side will also become 2. Sulfate ions is balanced. So we can write down the equation. Similarly, we can balance the following equations. Sodium reacting with water forming sodium hydroxide and hydrogen, Na plus H2O plus forming NaOH plus H2. We can start by balancing by keeping 2 in front of H2O, and we can see that also by placing 2 in front of sodium hydroxide we can balance it. Now write a balanced equation and also state the symbols for the following reaction, where barium chloride is made to react with sodium sulfate forming barium sulfate and sodium chloride. We have done that. We just need to balance the number of sodium and chlorine by placing a 2 in front, and then we can have a balanced equation. Sodium hydroxide solution reacts with hydrochloric acid forming sodium chloride and H2O. We can see that number of sodium, oxygen, hydrogen, chlorine on both the sides are equal, hence the equation is balanced. Exercise question, where we have to write H2 combining with N2 forming NH3, that is ammonia. We can balance it by placing 2 in front of NH3 and 3 in front of hydrogen. Next wala reaction, hydrogen sulfide combining with oxygen forming H2O plus SO2. We can do so by balancing the number of the greatest number, that will be in case of oxygen, and that you can easily find out how we can balance it. Thank you so much.